next week, we'll see. I'm going to introduce Jonathan Oliver, the principal over at Pineywoods Realty.
Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan with Pineywoods Capital. See a lot of familiar faces. Lunch has been catered by Taco Dirty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed lunch while we're learning about opportunity zones today. Just a quick introduction with Capital. We're an investment lender, so we lend on investment properties throughout Florida. So if you have a client or you yourself are looking for flips, rentals, commercial properties, we're happy to take a look. We do have a raffle going on, so I think we have a hat back there. So feel free to drop your business cards in. We have some Starbucks gift cards we'll hand out for you then. Without further ado, it's enough with Capital, but Edmon, we've been fortunate to get to know Edmon. I feel like we've known you a lot longer than whatnot, but at least basically within this year, Edmon's extremely passionate about what he does. Very experienced in the opportunity zone. So I hope this is true for you guys. Enjoy. I also have my cards here, so if you guys need my email, we've also got a few other folks in the office as well too. So feel free to grab this on the way out.
Cool. How's everyone doing?
Hey.
Awesome. Show of hands, yeah. Who's heard of opportunity zones and has a semi-in-depth knowledge? Good. All right.
So following them.
That's why I asked. I'm definitely going to. So, a couple of things that we're going to go over today. I'm going to keep it semi-high level, and if you have any in-depth questions about structure, things like that, we can talk after, because I don't want anyone to fall asleep while we're doing this, please. So, we're going to go over what are opportunity zones, what was the purpose of the legislation, why are these zones unique to everyone, the tax benefits, and how do you invest. So, Treasury put out 8,700 census tracts that they designated qualified opportunity zones. These are distressed areas, a lot of urban, but also a lot of rural areas. Florida has 427 designated opportunity zones. I kind of just put out our area here, but if you take a look at the Florida map, Central Florida is a big opportunity zone. We've got a couple pockets in southern Florida as well, and then up north, Panama City. Obviously, this got hit by the hurricane, so there's a lot of pockets in there. So, in 2017, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they slid in a little piece of legislation that was known as the Opportunity Zones. So, the point was to encourage long-term investments inside of these distressed areas. Okay, so it's not go in, flip, take your money off the table and leave. It's get in there, make a difference in the communities, rebuild them, revitalize them, build businesses, and go on from there. Okay? So, just a couple of my thoughts on why the opportunity zones are so unique and promising. Have a lot of flexibility inside the program. So it's not a pure real estate play. You can also launch businesses inside of them. Unlike some of the other programs like a 1031, you're not just constantly rolling over. Real estate, purchasing other property, going back and forth. I think personally, the space where you're going to see immense growth is putting businesses inside of these qualified opportunity zones and really letting them flourish. So as we move forward, you're going to see what the benefits are as far as deferral and exemption of taxes, and you'll understand why I think that. They're also extremely scalable, so there's no cap, right? They can't come in and say, hey, your fund can only put in, $500 million and then you're capped out, or, X amount in this area, which is great. And it's pretty simple, okay? So I know a lot of the rules are nuanced, but as you'll see, it's basic. Deferral, step up in basis, and exclusion, right? Obviously, a lot of rules within that, but it's basically that simple. All right, so what are the benefits, right? So you get a deferral. So any investor that has a capital gain of any sort can roll that cap gain into a qualified opportunity fund and defer the gain. So real estate, stocks, your wine collection, whatever you want, okay? The deferred gain must be recognized on the earlier date on which the opportunity zone investment is sold, or December 31, 2026. Now, 2019, okay? We do the math here, means you have 7 years for the And I'll go over a couple more dates on the next slide that really get in depth. But for those of you who are good at math, if you want the maximum 15% step up in basis, the investor has to be invested by December 31 of this year, okay? Now don't panic, don't go crazy telling everyone they have to move their money by the end of this year. You still get a deferral after this year, and it's still pretty beneficial, okay? So the step up in basis. When an investor puts in their money, they're at a zero basis, right? Hold your interest for 5 years, you get a 10% step up in basis, okay? Investor puts in $1 million, year 5, they're stepped up to $100,000, okay? Hold for 2 more years, 5% more, now you're up to $50K. That 8th year, the investor has to pay the tax on the remaining 85%. So you want to be a little conscious of that. Don't have your investor move all their money, not have any liquidity, get to year 8 and go, oh shit, I don't have money to pay my taxes, okay? So you got to be very conscious of that. And then the permanent exclusion. So this is the big carrot that they dangle at the end, right? You hold your interest in a qualified opportunity fund for 10 years. Any growth in that fund is then tax-free. So put in $1 million, year 10 you get an automatic step up for that $1 million. Your project, property, business is now worth $2 million. You're not paying any tax on $1 million. Right? Pretty simple. All right. So a lot of people have been asking, is it really worth it? You know, what's 5%, 10%, all that. So this is really basic. $1 million initial gain invested into a qualified opportunity fund. Expected annual return 10%. I'd make a joke about returns, but I'm a registered advisor, so I'd probably get fined. So $1 million, 5-year hold in a traditional investment portfolio, 10% expected return. You know, 1.1 with opportunities on investment, you're at 1.2. 7-year hold, you jump from 1.3 to 1.5. 10-year hold, 1.6 to 2.3. So you can see that's a pretty big improvement, and that's just with $1 million gains. Most of these projects that individuals are looking at in the real estate world are much bigger than that. And again, I want to make a comment on returns, but I can't. I don't want to get fined. All right, important dates to remember. So December 22nd, 2017 is when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was signed into law and established the opportunity zones for low-income communities. Okay? December 31, 2019, important date. If you want the full step-up in basis, that's when you have to be invested by. Then December 31, 2026, so the deferral period ends. Like I said, when the taxpayer sells their investment in the Qualified Opportunity Fund or December 31, 2026. So you do the math to get the 7-year step up, it's this year, to get the 10% step up for the 5 years, all your investors need to be invested by December 31, 2021. Okay? And then, this is one of my least favorite rules, and I hope they change it, December 31 of 2047. Okay? That's the date where the qualified opportunity funds, the investors, have to dispose of their interest in opportunity zones. There was an IRS hearing a couple weeks ago, about 5 hours long, and this was one of the main points on it. So if you think about it from an impact, an economic perspective for those communities, we're going in and we're dumping all this capital in. We're rebuilding, we're revitalizing, and then at 2047 we say, all right everyone, sell out, take your money, you gotta go. It just doesn't make sense. You're gonna really harm those communities. So hopefully they do away with that, or at least give us some leeway pertaining to that. All right, so the big question everyone keeps asking, how do I invest in opportunity zones? So to invest in an opportunity zone, you have to invest a capital gain. Take that gain, you roll it over into something called a qualified opportunity fund, okay? Your deferral must be made within 180 days, and I'll get into that on the next slide because it's important for those of you that work with investors that are corporations, some of them structured as partnerships, C Corps, S Corps, all of that. Qualified opportunity fund structure. So there is a lot of leeway in the way you can set up your qualified opportunity fund. So it can be C Corp, S Corp, partnership, And then the way you conduct business, it's two-tiered, a couple different ways. So a QOF can conduct business by directly holding stock in the qualified opportunity zone stock or qualified opportunity zone partnership interest. It may also conduct business directly by holding QOZEP, which is qualified opportunity zone business property. So I'm going to slow down there and work this out for you a little bit, right? So I know everyone in here is mostly focused on the real estate side, but you can have businesses inside of opportunity zones as well, okay? The main structure I've seen is a two-tier structure right now. Individuals will create a qualified opportunity fund, and then they'll go find their assets that they want to acquire, and then they'll drop them into either a REIT or a partnership, however they want. And that's the basic two-tier structure. You have a lot of flexibility that way. I took out some of the slides that were a little more granular, but if you do the math, the way that the proposed regs are set up, a qualified opportunity fund has to have 90% of its assets inside of a qualified opportunity zone. You drop that into a qualified opportunity zone business, go QOZB, the testing level drops to 70%. So if you do the math on that, you technically only have to hold 64% of your assets inside of a qualified opportunity zone business. So that's one of the nuances that they're talking about, closing, but I don't think it's going to happen because if you look at the preamble to the legislation, they've literally done the math out there for you showing that. So there's a lot of flexibility. My advice, just drive the ball down the fairway. Like, don't try to get fancy, don't try to mess with treasury. Last thing you want is one of your funds to just implode because you thought it was cute to test that 64% on it. All right, the 180-day rule. So like I mentioned before, we have 180 days for the taxpayer to defer that gain. Okay, so with an S corp or a partnership, they can realize that gain if it's passed through to them and it's not deferred by the S corp. They have 180 days to realize that gain after the last day of the entity's tax year, not on the date of the sale. Okay, so you've got a little room there. As far as shareholders and partnerships go, they may elect to take the 180-day period pertaining to the distributive share as the same day as the entity's 180-day period. So that allows them to accelerate a little bit, right? So if the entity says, hey, we've realized gain on March 15th, their partner or shareholder can elect to make that the date and not wait till the end of the year, okay? So it's a two-part thing. You can either accelerate your deferral, or you can push it out. Section 1231 assets as well. Okay, so with Section 1231, for those of you who took accounting in college, I'm suggesting in here right now, with 1231, you have to wait the entire year to net your 1231 gains and losses, right? So with 1231 assets, you've got to wait till the end of the year. That rule kind of sucks if you only have one or two of those assets, you realize a huge gain, you want to defer it, you have a project picked out, and you're sitting here on February 12th going, can't wait for these next 11 months to go by so I can defer my gain. But it makes sense for some of the larger corporations that have multiple 1231 assets that they've got to net out. Okay. All right. Everyone in here who loves a 1031 in here? All right, good. We're not going to use them anymore, okay? So, with a 1031, an investor must reinvest the principal and capital within 180 days. Most of the time, this transaction is done by an intermediary. Okay. So here's one of the differences between the 1031s and the qualified opportunity funds. Let's say my original investment was $500,000. I sold for $1 million in a 1031, rolling everything over, right? Qualified opportunity fund, I take my principal off the table. Okay, so I only have to roll over that $500,000 gain. Okay, so that's a huge benefit for someone who wants to take some cash off the table. Depreciation recapture, again, I know we're not accountants in here, but in 1031, if you exit early, you might have to pay depreciation recapture. You don't deal with that depending on the entity structure of your qualified opportunity fund. Right? Qualified assets So with 1031s, you're rolling over property, rolling over real estate. In a QOF, any capital asset can be used. 1031 is usually called a perpetual deferral, so most people just continue to roll over the 1031s until they die, and then their family can take that step up in basis. You don't have to deal with that in the qualified opportunity fund. So I think it's a great benefit for the investors. All right, opportunity zone legislation pertaining to REITs. Okay, so I figured real estate class, we better talk to REITs a little bit. So the legislation reads that a taxpayer, including a REIT, may temporarily defer an eligible gain inside a qualified opportunity fund. They're also eligible for the step-up in basis and the exclusion. Okay, so you can run a qualified opportunity fund as a REIT. Liquidity through listing. So you can actually list your REITs. I know most of you that play in that space know that. So the private investment vehicles, don't have access to capital markets. So if you think about what am I going to do with my fund in year 10, 15, 20, things like that, you're structured as a REIT, you can list. Okay, so I think that's one of the bigger benefits of that. And then diversification. So depending on the projects you're working on, unless you're going to run a multi-asset fund, you're probably going to be in 1, 2, 3 assets. You're not going to have a lot of diversification. Run a REIT, go anywhere you want, right? So you're not restricted to projects in Florida or anything like that in any of these structures. But if you look at investing in general, diversification is the only free lunch. Probably argue with that because every sector is doing the same thing for the past 10 years. But definitely some great benefits to operating as a REIT. Some other potential benefits of operating as a REIT is a 20% dividend deduction. So although any pass-through entity really has that 20% dividend deduction, outside of a REIT, a lot of the other partnership structures, the LLC structures, could run into issues where Treasury says, hey, you have certain limitations, you don't get to take that 20% deduction. Reduced income tax exposure. Again, it's a tax incentive program. So because a REIT is a C Corp and its shareholders are generally only subject to the taxation where the shareholder resides, rather than where the jurisdiction of the property is owned by the REIT, they're not having to deal with taxes across the nation. Okay, so that's really good. Pass-through entities, on the other hand, could be subject to taxation wherever their entity does business. So I think that's one of the really, really good benefits. And for those of you who have picky investors who don't want, 1,000 tax documents, a REIT provides the shareholders with a 1099. So no messy K1s. Okay, you're not having to deal with 50 different K1s, and then we're dropping them off to Clifton Larson Allen or whoever our accountants are, saying, all right, figure it out. All right, now what everyone wants to know: where are the zones in our area? Next couple slides, I've broken these down a little more. As you can see, these opportunity zones aren't all in extremely distressed areas. Okay, this pocket right here is downtown Clearwater. Okay, that is waterfront property that is in an opportunity zone. Okay, but I literally live right here. I drive into downtown Clearwater every single day. I don't understand how it's an opportunity zone, but I'm not complaining. So I'm going to take it. Yeah.
And all the commercial areas.
So time to develop it, right? South St. Pete, High Point, West Bay, Tampa. Not going. So some of the Tampa Bay opportunity zones. So you can see right out, downtown Tampa, right outside the UT area. Spruce, right behind the international airport. All the way down to Orient. Been there once or twice. Just kidding. I meant the casino, not the jail. Then we've got a really, really big area from basically Brandon down to Gibsonton. So, Port of Tampa all the way down, almost Gibsonton, and then a pretty large area. We have Palm River off the Selman as well. And then North Tampa region. So, anyone who's gone to USF knows how bad it is there. I'm not gonna lie, I used to buy my Jordans at University Mall when I was like 16 years old. I'm proud to say that I don't do that anymore, but I've been down there. And then we've got the little pocket outside of here as well. The Busch Gardens area, all of that, as we know, if you drive down there, it's a pretty distressed area, but it's a lot of room for growth. So just a little more in-depth on the Pinellas County zones that we looked at there. Tropicana Field, they would just build our own stadium together, find the money to do it. All the way down here, a lot of these properties is something I'd be looking at if I were you guys. And again, I know that downtown Clearwater has its challenges, but a lot of great properties out there if you have the patience to do it. All right. Now, how do real estate agents or anyone involved in the space really get involved? Know your census tracts, okay? Like, get to know them well in the areas that you function in. I can't tell you how many people call me like, I've got this great property, yada yada, like it's in an opportunity zone, and I'm looking, it's like 4 miles outside of an opportunity zone. And I'm like, what map are you using? Okay? But getting to know your tracts will be extremely beneficial to you. You can drive by a property, you'll know exactly, hey, that's in the zone, I like this property, let's take a look at it. Understand the legislation, okay? I understand not everyone in here is an advisor or an accountant, and I don't want you to read all 264 pages that they put out like I've done twice. But understand the basics, right? There are some basic rules inside of the proposed regs as well. One is called substantial improvement. I don't want to dive too deep into it, but had someone call and say, hey, I've got this amazing property for you, opportunity zone, it's brand new, $25 million, and I'm like, so please tell me where I'm going to put another $25 million into this to substantially improve that property. So that rule, you acquire property, it's already been placed in service, you have to substantially improve it. Okay, the point of this program is to rebuild and revitalize communities, not just go in and throw in condos. So in that example, I would have had to spend another $25 million on that property. Okay? From a real estate perspective, from an agent perspective, partner with developers, right? I mean, these are the individuals that are out there before the Opportunity Zone program, helping rebuild communities. Partner with them, find the locations. Be the advocate for them. Be their go-to. And then find a niche. I know this is like super cliche, but let's say one of your clients is really, really into storage or any type of industry, and you can sit and look at the maps nationwide. It doesn't just have to be here, and you can find locations for them. They're going to love you, right? You say, hey, I've got 3-4 locations for your business or your property that really makes sense, and be known as that person. Everyone will start coming to you. Hey, that's the car wash guy. This guy throws up car washes left and right. Let me reach out to him.
Is this for the development zone?
This is actually the new gynecology project. No, I'm just kidding. We're about to get into that slide. You miss childbirth, you're good.
That's good.
All right. Now, got people going on their toes this week. For those of you who are with Pineywoods and those of you who know them well, leverage your team here. You guys are extremely lucky to have a team like Pineywoods Capital, the insurance group, mortgage, realty, title, all in one house. Like John said, we recently just met this year, but I feel like, I know these guys inside and out. I've known, Daniel Holtz for a really, really long time. Make this process as smooth as possible for your clients, right? Like, you have all of the resources here, utilize them. Those of you who aren't with Pineywoods, still utilize their teams, build relationships with them. I probably have more meetings with financial advisors sometimes than I do with, either prospective clients or some of our other clients, just to bounce ideas and, stay up to speed. What's going on? What's new in the industry? How are you guys changing? How are you adapting? What are you doing? There's no reason you can't do the same. I mean, there's enough money out there for everyone. I promise you. If you sit here with that mentality and think, I'm not going to talk to this person or that person, they're in the same business, we do the same thing, you have the wrong mindset. If you can't look around the Tampa Bay area and see the growth and opportunity that's happening, I would just leave the business, right? Like, either that or change your mindset fast. So, utilize your resources. I know we covered a lot, but any questions? Ms. Blake?
Can you talk about the deployment of money by the 31st of December in 2018?
Yes.
That almost sounds overwhelming that you could do it that quickly, given today being the end of July.
Yep.
Can you expand on
Absolutely. So,
that? And what are the consequences? What does that look like?
if you
Over
miss that
that
date,
on-call period.
it's not, right? So let's say you can't get your investors' money into a fund, or you want to go crazy and you want to launch your own fund by December 31st. You're still getting that 10% step up in basis for another 2 years, and that exclusion on the back end. I mean, sit there and grab a calculator, annualize 5% over the holding period for these projects. It's nothing. Now, here's one thing I will caution you on. The way the legislation is written right now in the proposed regs, if you do not hit the 2021 date and you don't qualify for the step up in basis, you will not get the exclusion on the back end.
I'll get back.
Yeah, so no going in 2023, 2024 and saying, I held for 10 years, can I have an exclusion? Right now, the way that it's written, you will not qualify for the exclusion.
So there's criteria built in, like, it's an incentive.
Correct.
That's the reinvestment and then the building of it, so when you bought dirt, you paid $500, you could put like $250 into the separate basis for construction.
So if you'd have bought it with your $500,000. So what Janine was just talking about is the investor sells a property, they have $500,000 in gain. It has to be in a qualified opportunity fund by the end of this year to get a full 15% step up in basis.
Okay.
Yep.
I've got a question regarding the 64%.
Yep.
So if I'm a farmer in Central Florida and I am manufacturing or growing a product, am I hearing this right that 64% of my business is held in the opportunity zone and I can have the rest? I can have a processing plant, I can have the distribution facility, I can have a retail shop outside of the 64, outside the opportunity zone, and still, one, maintain the tax benefits, and then two, what about my revenue generated from that business? What are the tax implications of that?
Great question. So the slide that I took off addressed those. So 3 safe harbors, okay? So the first safe harbor is, because that's a great question, or also think like a tech company, right? We're headquartered right here, we sell software all over the world. But none of my guys are really out there for the most part. Do I not qualify because all my sales are worldwide? You still do. So the first safe harbor is a 50% salary safe harbor, right? So if 50% of your compensation, not salary, of your compensation is within the opportunity zone, you're fine, you're in the clear. The next one is hours worked. So I've got to look at it, but a certain amount of hours worked inside of the op zone, and you're in the clear as well. And the third one's weird and nuanced, and no one's going to use it, so I didn't even pay attention to it. But those are the 2 main ones: 50% of compensation inside, and most of your hours worked inside the op zone, and you're in the clear.
Either or?
Either or. Yeah, you don't have. It's not like a hurdle. Like, okay, you hit that, you hit that, you hit that. Either or. You're in the clear.
And what about the revenue generated from,
Doesn't matter.
I'm not paying taxes on that money.
Revenue generated during business?
Yes, sir.
No. So, really, really good question. So, all of the regular rules apply to operating businesses, property, dividend, all of that. The benefit is on the step up from your gain,
Okay.
and then the exclusion on the back end when you sell your interest,
Okay.
right? But you can marry, different programs, new tax credits. Say you operate as a C corp, it won't matter. You just have to have benefits. Yep.
Does your credit level qualify?
As gains? Absolutely.
I own a property in Opportunity Zone 4, December 2017. Can I start a business? Before
Before.
I already bought it, or somebody bought it. Can I start a business in that building?
and you start a business in that building. Do you own the building?
Yes.
So I own the building, I want to start the business.
And it's in the opportunity zone. Like, you're bringing in jobs and
Absolutely.
salaries. Can I start a business in that building today and still qualify with the game?
Is my business going to own the building afterwards, or are they two separate entities?
Two separate entities.
Then no problem. Okay. Yeah. Now, if you wanted to say, ABC company bought this building in 2015, I want to open a business inside of it, and that business is now going to own the building, no, you can only have a 20%
That's the
interest.
problem.
Yep. So, and there's a lot of rules that have to do with arm's length transactions and leasing as well. Let's not put everyone to sleep today. I explained it that well that we don't.
I have another question.
If you're ready.
So, and maybe you wanted to skip it, but substantial improvements maybe. So you're saying you have $1 million gain, right? You really only buy a property with $500,000, and you put the other 500 into it, correct?
One more
Is
time.
that too fast? Sorry, all right, you have $1 million gain. To
Yes.
start the year, you have $1 million in your opportunity fund. You can really only buy a property worth $500,000, and your other $500,000
That's a substantial improvement.
substantially improved, correct?
You can use leverage as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right, the unqualified versus qualified.
Yep. Yeah, it's basically 1-1.
So that's what I want to ask you, because I've read that it actually is minus the land value. No?
And land's a totally other thing. So the verbiage side of it is substantially, substantially all. There's literally no number, right? So until we get the final regs, hopefully at the end of this year, it's kind of a little dangerous to play in that world, right? Tony Nitty, CPA, uses this example. You know, substantially improving a property, I can go buy land, put a hot dog stand out there, sell hot dogs, and I've substantially improved that property. But if you look at it, you know, if you look at the abuse rules, they're pretty vague inside of it, right?
Self-identifying.
Right, and you're self-identifying. But that doesn't mean Treasury can't come in and shut your ass down real quick, right? So if you want to play cute and do little things like that, just be prepared for the repercussions.
So it's 100%, like development, because like if you do land, I have 231 opportunities on buy right now. We're struggling to find something, they have 500, and we're turned to just looking at land and developing it within the next 2.5 years.
How much are you going to spend on the development?
Well, they said that they have to spend at least 50% of the 500, is what their QOS people are telling them.
You're going to be close there. So you have to substantially improve it. There's no number. I think you could fight Treasury on that and not.
We're gonna run well above that, but I was just asking for guidelines, like the bill probably like 500 or 600 also.
Then you'll be totally fine on that. And one of the most common answers to a lot of the questions in opportunity zones right now is, I don't know, and that's literally because we don't know. Like the regs that have come out, tranche 1 and 2, are proposed regulation, right?
You have to buy it before the end of this year.
Right, so think about that. So hey, here's this tax program we slid in at the end of 2017. Read those. Tranche 1, October, I believe. We had another hearing on Valentine's Day of this year. Second set of proposed regs came out April. Good luck reading through these, and you now have 8 months to invest for the full 50% settlement basis. So hasn't been the cleanest, but there's huge benefit there, guys. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of little nuances, but if you can't look at the way that this program is set up and see that there's a benefit, you shouldn't even play in that arena.
Is there any local kind of opportunity zone or venture funds that you're aware of?
Local,
Yeah.
not right now.
Any in the works?
For compliance purposes, I would say potentially, yeah. Some of the bigger funds that you'll see that are already in the space, Caliber companies out of Arizona, Manny Friedman of EJF Capital, the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, Skybridge, they've got like a $3 billion fund that they're supposed to do with EJF that fell apart. You are seeing a lot of, I mean, listen, it doesn't have to be a sophisticated individual to do this, right? If you have an apartment building, you want to sell it and just open up another apartment building and use your gain, it doesn't have to be complicated. Set up a QOF, set up your entity, buy that building with your gain, and you're good to go. Ms. Stricker, any questions?
I do see my wheels.
Yes,
Like, I'm processing some work with them right now, and this is probably okay, so, simple, stupid.
Perfect.
The minimum that you need to do to qualify for this at all is at least open up the qualified fund with the money, correct? The minimum. Not
Yes.
just the property yet, but the very minimum to get some type of benefit of this, right?
Good question. So let's say you haven't identified the property yet, and your investor's like, I'm at day 170. I have $500,000 in gains. I do not want to pay that. Open your fund, get the money rolled over, invest it in there, and now you have 31 months to deploy capital. Okay, as long as you have a business plan. You then, 2 rules: 31 months to deploy capital for a fund, 30 months to substantially improve property. Okay? I know, I really wish they just would use 31 and 31, but
Why would we make it
Additional.
Does it have to be fun?
correct. And that's from Brady. That's from the time that a check money hits your fund. So let's say I'm being smart and I tell all the investors, hey, better not send me a check until December 26th, right? Hold off. And Grandma's hearing aid was off on that conference call with our investors, and her check hits today. My clock starts.
What if you have an entity with a large gain with a half a dozen partners, and say one of the partners doesn't want to go into a QOF or a QOF deal,
Yep.
and wants to take their money well? Can you say that if you start over?
Let me go. No, so in that scenario, what I would do is all the other partners that do want to go, I would have the entity elect to pass through the gains to your level, not to the entity level, and invest that way. Because, I mean, you could do it, you just wouldn't roll over all that gain, but then that part would still be inside your entity in the other one, so it would get sticky there. But I would have that entity that realized the gain distribute it to
And then
its
start.
startup.
Okay. I'm sure my lawyer said the same thing.
Does it have to be a fund or can this be an individual?
You could individual. A QOF is nothing but an entity, right? It's a fancy word for C Corp, S Corp, LLC, partnership, all of that. They're just called qualified opportunity.
But it has to, the individual has to own it within inside of this. Okay.
And any taxpayer.
What if the individual dies
Good question.
within the term? Does
Their heirs.
do they just get the normal step up in basis based on current tax law, or do they get to maintain the continued program?
So they basically take over for
Okay.
mom, dad, whoever
That's
was in there. Yeah. Now, if they're living and they just pass their interest on, it restarts the clock. But if they pass away, good to go. The heirs pick up right where it left off. You don't start your 10-year hold period again. You don't start your deferral period again, or things like that.
Good.
Are you texting your wife back there, dude?
Me?
Yeah, that ugly. No,
I was waiting for another one.
no, I'm just kidding. Cool. If there's no more questions, there's still a lot of food